Overnight, the IDF retrieved the bodies of 6 Israeli hostages from a Hamas tunnel in Rafah. According to the army, they were murdered by their captors only a few days before they were found. Prime Minister Netanyahu said the murders prove that Hamas does not want a hostage for ceasefire deal.
בימים אלה, בשעה שישראל מנהלת משא ומתן אינטנסיבי מול המתווכות במאמץ עליון להגיע לעסקה, החמאס ממשיך לסרב בתוקף לכל הצעה. חמור מכך, באותו זמן ממש הוא רצח 6 מחטופינו. מי שרוצח חטופים לא רוצה עסקה.
The hostages whose bodies were recovered are those of Hirsch Goldberg Poland, 23, Eden Yerushalmi, 24, Ori Danino, 25, Alex Lubnov, 32, Carmel Gat, age 40, and Almog Sarusi, 25. The IDF did not have the exact location of the hostages, but had indications of a general area where the 6 captives could be held. The tunnel in which the slain hostages were found in Rafah is about 1 kilometer away from where the soldiers found and rescued hostage Farhan al-Qadi alive earlier this week.
על פי הערכה הראשונית העומדת ברשותנו, הם נרצחו באכזריות על ידי מחבלי חמאס זמן קצר לפני שהגענו אליהם. הם נחטפו חיים בבוקר 7 באוקטובר על ידי ארגון הטרור חמאס. גופותיהם אותרו במהלך הלחימה ברפיח במנהרה תת-קרקעית. במרחק כקילומטר מהמנהרה ממנה חילצנו לפני מספר ימים את פרחן קאדי.
Troops began to search a tunnel complex until they found the hostages' bodies yesterday afternoon. Overnight, their bodies were extracted from Gaza and brought to Israel for identification. There were no clashes with Hamas terrorists inside the tunnel, and the guards who likely murdered the 6 fled the area. Goldberg Polin, Yerushalmi, Danino, Lubnov, and Sarusi were abducted from the Nova Music Festival near Kibbutz Re'im by Hamas terrorists on October 7th. Gat was taken from Kibbutz Be'eri. Hirsch was a dual U.S.-Israeli citizen, and President Biden issued a personal statement to his parents. I have worked tirelessly to bring your beloved Hirsch safely to you, and I am heartbroken by the news of his death. It is as tragic as it is reprehensible. Make no mistake, Hamas leaders will pay for these crimes, and we will keep working around the clock for a deal to secure the release of the remaining hostages. Biden insisted the hostage for ceasefire deal is still within reach. Mediated efforts by the U.S., Egypt, and Qatar to broker a deal between Israel and Hamas are still ongoing, but there are sticking points. The Security Cabinet passed a motion supported by Prime Minister Netanyahu insisting that the IDF remain on the Philadelphia corridor in any hostage for ceasefire agreement. Defense Minister Gallant was the lone dissenting voice, arguing that the IDF can manage without Philadelphia and it's holding up an agreement. And we're now joined by Alex Trayman, the CEO and Jerusalem Bureau Chief for JNS. Welcome, Alex.
Thank you for having me.
Alex, the IDF confirmed that the 6 hostages found yesterday were murdered by Hamas within the last 3 days, 20 meters down in the same tunnels as Bedouin hostage Farhan al-Qadi. Given what we know so far, what's your assessment of the situation?
Well, the United States and others told Israel not to go into Rafah to begin with. They drew it as a red line. Prime Minister Netanyahu went through that red light and understood that Israel had to go into Rafah because that's where many of the senior terrorists have been hiding, and that's where many of the hostages are located. And we figured out again that that is the case, and these 6 hostages were being held there. They were only killed because the IDF was on their track, and they were going to try to attempt to rescue. Obviously, Hamas doesn't want the IDF to be able to rescue hostages, and therefore the orders are that if they know the IDF is coming, to kill the hostages first.
Alex, it's been 331 days since Hamas captured our civilians, with many now dead. Was holding the Philadelphia corridor worth the lives of these 6 hostages?
The Philadelphia corridor is one of those other places that the United States told Israel not to take. But in the last months, hundreds of tunnels were found in Rafah and under the Philadelphia corridor, which is the border between Gaza and Egypt. Many of those tunnels are wide enough for trucks to drive back and forth through. And it's clear that these were the smuggling routes used to arm Hamas in Gaza and potentially have been used to smuggle terrorist leaders and or hostages even out of the Gaza Strip. So it's an important, very important strategic corridor for the IDF to control, specifically if Israel wants to make sure that Hamas doesn't restock itself with arms and other supplies after a ceasefire is reached.
Alex, President Biden expressed deep sorrow over the death of American hostage Hersh Goldberg Poland. The president constantly spoke out on the issue, perhaps more than our own prime minister. How might this impact Israeli-U.S. relations?
Well, I think that the Biden administration could have done a lot more, and they could have put the overwhelming majority of the pressure, diplomatic pressure, on Hamas, on Iran, to release the hostages, but they clearly did not do that. We see over the last period that much of the diplomatic pressure has been put on Israel to reach the ceasefire, not on Hamas to release all of the hostages. I don't think that it's going to affect in any way the Israel-U.S. relations, but if you will recall, it was told that the last round of negotiations was a last chance, which I don't understand why it's the last chance. As long as there are still hostages and as long as fighting still rages, there should be more and more and endless chances to get the hostages back. We have to see whether the United States is going to be willing to act as a broker to try to negotiate a release after this horrific news.
Well, what message was Hamas sending with these murders, and what message should the world understand from their actions?
Well, this was the purpose of taking the hostages to begin with, to commit psychological terror against the state of Israel, to keep Israelis hoping and guessing and waiting for the eventual rescue or return of the hostages. Unfortunately, the murder of these 6 hostages is another reminder of the cruel reality that these hostages were taken in the most brutal massacre in the history of the state of Israel on October 7th. I guess the only consolation here is that it does provide some bit of closure for those families, and particularly for Americans and English speakers with regards to Hersh Goldberg Poland, and everybody saw how his mother Rachel Goldberg and John Poland, were really doing everything that they could to try to secure his release, including appearing at the Democratic National Convention just over a week ago. So horrific moment, of course, for everybody.
Today marks the first day of school, and as a father, you know this day feels very different from in years past. Can you describe the atmosphere in Israel today and how we're coping with this tragic news?
Yeah, well, certainly there are close to 80,000 residents in the north that have been expelled from their homes shortly after October 7th because of the frequent pummeling by Hezbollah on their communities. There was a hope that they were going to be returned home in order to begin to send their kids to school on September 1st. Obviously, that hasn't happened as of yet. It's a difficult reality for people to be sending their children to school. Kids have been following the war. These are the types of situations that children should not know anything about. But unfortunately, here in the Middle East and here in the land of Israel, we recognize that we have to fight for our existence and fight for our survival. And yet another school year begins with Israel at war and dreaming of peace.
Well, thank you very much for that, Alex.
Thank you for having me. 3
police officers were killed in a terrorist shooting attack this morning on a highway in Judea. They've been named as Arik Ben Eliyahu, age 37, Hadass Brentz, 53, and Rani Shakuri, father of a policewoman killed on October 7th. The attack comes after 2 bomb-laden cars exploded in Gush Etzion amid an ongoing anti-terror operation in Samaria. According to initial reports, terrorists arrived in the area and fired at a police car, hitting 3 officers before fleeing the scene. 2 were declared dead at the scene and 1 died in hospital. The names of the victims were not given, but they were a man and woman in their 30s and a man in his 50s. The vehicle used by the terrorists was abandoned shortly after the attack. Security forces have launched a search. Over the weekend in the Etzion block south of Jerusalem, 2 cars exploded, each packed with makeshift explosive devices in what is believed to have been a coordinated attack. The 2 terrorists involved in the attacks were killed by troops at the scene. In the first incident, a car exploded at a gas station near the Gush Etzion junction. Troops arriving at the scene shot and killed the terrorist who had arrived in the vehicle and attempted to attack them. 20 minutes later, a terrorist breached into the nearby Karmei Tzur settlement before being shot dead. The terrorist car exploded inside the community. There were no injuries. The IDF then encircled Hebron and nearby towns in the area where the two bombers came from. The army located and demolished the bomb-making lab in Hebron. The army said there is no immediate danger of more bombings, and the incident is considered over. 6 Palestinians suspected with involvement in the dual-car bombing attacks were arrested.
אתמול בלילה היה פיגוע של 2 רכבי תופת, יצא מאזור חברון לאזור גוש עציון, ותסתכלו על הפיגוע הזה, מה שאתם עושים כאן, הכניסה לתוך מחנות הפליטים, בדיוק הרעיון שהמחבלים לא יוכלו להטעין את חומר הנפץ על רכב התופת, ולצאת ולעשות פיגוע ביישוב, על כוחות צה"ל או בכל מקום אחר, ומפה הרעיון ההתקפי הזה של ללכת ולהיכנס לטרור למקומות שבהם הוא בונה את יכולות החבלה, זה דבר מאוד מאוד חשוב.
The major ongoing IDF anti-terrorist sweep is continuing in Samaria, and the focus has now moved from Nur Shams and Tulkarem and Farah to Jenin. Troops raided a Jenin neighborhood where they neutralized dozens of explosive devices that were planted along the roads. Fierce gunfights erupted between IDF troops and Palestinian gunmen. An IDF soldier was killed in the clashes. He was identified as Staff Sergeant Elkanah Navon, age 20, from Petah Tikva. Since the start of the anti-terror operation last week, the IDF says troops have killed at least 26 terrorists and detained many wanted men.
אין לנו שום כוונה לתת לטרור באיו"ש להרים את הראש, ולכן היוזמה לעבור עיר, מחנה פליטים, עם מודיעין מצוין, עם יכולות מבצעיות טובות מאוד, עם מעטפת מודיעינית אווירית חזקה מאוד, ובעיקר עם לוחמים, מפקדים, ערכיים מאוד, נחושים מאוד. אני רואה בדיוק את הדבקות במשימה. אנחנו בדרך הזו נגן על אזרחי ישראל, זה בדיוק ככה.
A new report reveals that at least 6,000 Gazans, only 60% Nukba terrorists, breached Israel's border on October 7th, murdering innocent Israelis. This is double the number previously reported. ILTV's Mayan Hoffman has more.
New details about the October 7 attack by Hamas and Gazan citizens against Israel were revealed over the weekend in a special report by Israel's Channel 12. According to updated information, at least 6,000 Gazans breached Israel's border on October 7 through 119 gaps they created in the fence separating Israel from the Gaza Strip, double the number previously reported. Previously, it was understood that the fence was breached in only around 60 locations. Out of the 6,000 Gazans who crossed into Israel, 3,800 were highly trained Nukhba terrorists. The remaining 2,200 were either terrorists from other groups or civilians from Gaza who joined the fighters to murder and loot. Additionally, the report stated that another 1,000 terrorists participated in the assault from within Gaza. These terrorists fired around 4,300 rockets at Israel and provided support to the forces carrying out the massacre on Israeli soil. Channel 12 said that the numbers are based on a thorough investigation by the Gaza Division submitted to the Chief of Staff. In response, the IDF stated that the operational investigation is ongoing and continues according to situational assessments and operational constraints. Once completed, the findings will be transparently presented to the public. Israel has consistently argued that Gazan civilians were actively involved in the October 7 attack, the same civilians who are now claiming a humanitarian crisis. Many of these individuals sided with Hamas during the assaults, and polls indicate that a majority still support the terror organization, even as Israel continues its military operations in the Gaza Strip.
Despite the tragic news of 6 Israeli hostages murdered by Hamas, Israel has coordinated a polio vaccination campaign across the Gaza Strip to protect Palestinian civilians. The campaign launched today. More details from ILTV's Mayan Hoffman.
Israel is urging the international community to include at-risk Israeli hostages in its ongoing polio vaccination campaign, which should be underway in Gaza for the next 10 days. In a heartfelt letter to the heads of the World Health Organization and the United Nations, Professor Haggai Levine, head of the Health Division for the Hostages and Missing Family Forum and chairman of the Israeli Association of Public Health Physicians, emphasized the dire need for vaccinations among the approximately 100 hostages still held in the Gaza Strip. Some of these hostages suffer from chronic medical conditions that require regular care, while others have sustained injuries that need treatment. Despite being abducted 11 months ago by Hamas, proof of life has been denied, and humanitarian visits from the International Committee of the Red Cross or any other organizations have been blocked. Levine highlighted the importance of including Fir Bibas, a 1.5-year-old child, and Ariel Bibas, who recently turned 5, in the vaccination efforts. He also stressed the need to address the vaccination needs of adult hostages, many of whom are overdue for polio and tetanus boosters. The polio vaccination campaign in Gaza aims to immunize roughly 640,000 children by September 9th. The campaign began today in the central part of the Strip and will gradually expand to the south and north. It specifically targets children from birth to 10 years old, with a goal of reaching 90% of the target population.
لأنه كل خطوة بتمشيها بدك تحمد الله إنك أنت مشيت بسلامة، لأنه إشي بخوف هذا عشان القصف يعني اللي بصير والطخ والطيارات والأشياء هذه، فالواحد بخاف والله. ولزاها يعني صغيرة هذه، يعني من أي خبر من أي إشي بتتلوث وبصير فيها أي إشي، أي فيروس، أي التهاب جلدي أو بكتيريا أو أي إشي لا سمح الله.
It was initially reported that Israel had agreed to a ceasefire for the distribution and administration of polio vaccines. However, the Prime Minister's office clarified over the weekend that instead, Israel will establish a humanitarian corridor to allow aid workers entry and designate specific areas for the safe administration of vaccines. The office emphasized Israel's commitment to preventing a polio outbreak in Gaza, Israel, and the wider region. Since the start of the war, 282,126 vials of polio vaccine, enough to inoculate more than 2.8 million recipients, have been transported into Gaza through the Kerem Shalom crossing, coordinated by COGAT. In the past month alone, vaccines for more than 1 million recipients have been delivered. Polio was first discovered in waste samples from the coastal enclave in mid-July. Since then, there has been one confirmed case of a 10-month-old baby who was paralyzed. This was the first such case in 25 years.
We are right now in the central cold storage, where we have received more than 1.2 million doses of NOPV2 vaccine, and approximately 400,000 doses are en route. These doses have been maintained in the cold chain, and these will be transported today to the various distribution points in the middle area.
As the new school year began in Israel today, the country faces the dual challenge of ongoing war and the displacement of thousands of families. The IDF have implemented extraordinary measures to safeguard students and staff, while the education system grapples with providing proper education to evacuee children. ILTV's Ariella Lachiani went back to school.
Yes, so as we mark September 1st, we mark the first day back to school, and what is typically a very joyous day full of excitement as we start the new school year, this year is definitely overshadowed by the ongoing war. Many students are suffering as their parents are serving in the reserves, and the IDF are preparing to ensure the safety and security of all students amid the war, including deploying hundreds of bomb shelters near bus stops and schools, and also stationing reserve soldiers near school campuses amid any possible threats. More in the following report. In response to the current security situation, the IDF has deployed hundreds of bomb shelters at bus stops and near schools nationwide. Reservists have been stationed at key intersections and school campuses for rapid response to any threat. The early warning system has been upgraded, and soldiers are filling in for educators who have been called to reserve duty. With Hezbollah's near-daily assaults, thousands of families have been displaced and relocated across Israel. According to the Taub Center, around 68,500 Israelis have been evacuated from northern communities, with 17,000 of them being school-aged children. The Education Ministry has set up temporary educational frameworks in various locations, including new K-12 schools in Eilat, Tiberias, and Tel Aviv. As Israel navigates these unprecedented challenges, The resilience of its people and the preparedness of its institutions are being put to the test. The education system, like the rest of the country, is adapting to ensure that even in times of crisis, the future remains a priority.
And now some good news with Israel racking up medals at the Paralympic Games in Paris this summer, securing 2 gold medals and a bronze in an emotional weekend. ILTV's Debo Klein has more.
Israel's first Paralympic medal was a gold, a first-place win for Taekwondo flyweight Asaf Yassur. Adorned with an Israeli flag and an iconic Jewish kippah, Yassur, who lost both of his hands at age 13, secured the gold after beating Turkey 18-12 in the final of the men's under 58-kilogram category. Israel's second medal was also a gold, won by Israeli swimmer Ami Dadon after winning Friday's 100-meter freestyle S4. This medal is Dadon's career 4th, finishing with a time of 1 minute 20 and 25, nearly a second in front of the Japanese silver medalist. An inspiring video was spread across social media depicting Dadon in an emotional podium ceremony as the Israeli anthem Hatikva played in the background. The Paralympian was born with cerebral palsy and had begun his swimming career at age 6. Israel is now ranked 17th, with the win of a bronze medal by Israeli swimmer Mark Maliar in the men's 100-meter backstroke in the S8 disability class. Maliar, who was born with cerebral palsy, said he dedicated his medal to the IDF soldiers fighting to protect the state of Israel. Israel had a mixed run on Saturday with wins in rowing and wheelchair tennis and losses in badminton, goalball, and bocce. With more water sports to come, Team Israel is hopeful for more medals.
We're excited to announce the first ever ILTV News Community Webinar, where you can ask Editor-in-Chief Mayan Hoffman your most pressing questions about Israel. Scan the code on your screen and join us this Tuesday, 2 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 p.m. Israel Time. The exclusive webinar is for our subscribers, those who support accurate reporting on Israel by being part of the ILTV News community. Not a subscriber yet? There's still time. Just scan the code on your screen to join the ILTV News community and take advantage of this exciting opportunity.
Sagot Winery, where passion meets tradition. Nestled in the heart of Binyamin, our vineyards yield exquisite wines crafted with generations of expertise.
Now let's take a look at the weather forecast. It's September 1st and cooler days are coming, and not the hotter and hottest August weather. Cloudy skies are expected tonight around the country, and temperatures are dropping and reaching lows of around 22 degrees Celsius or 73 degrees Fahrenheit. Tomorrow we should see mostly cloudy skies and highs of 33 degrees Celsius or 92 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's a wrap for today's news. For the latest updates from Israel on all your devices, be sure to follow our ILTV channels, subscribe to our ILTV newsletter, and explore our website, iltv.tv. Stay informed with the latest news straight from the heart of Israel. I'm Steve Leibowitz. Let's bring the hostages home alive.